You know you're in for a treat today when my guest's nickname is The Legend. That is his nickname. My guest, Frank Shamrock, today is a UFC champion. He's a Strikeforce champion in mixed martial arts. He's been a commentator on national television. He's been in commercials. He's acted with Chuck Norris and in other movies. This guy had the most crazy upbringing, just a hard life as a young person, and even ended up going to prison, and he'll talk about that. But the way he's turned his life around and helped other people turn their lives around through athletics, through business, and just through coaching and mentoring. This is a wonderful interview with an amazing human being. Frank is a former mixed martial artist who competed and won at the highest of levels. He was the king of Pancrase, the UFC middleweight champion, the Strikeforce middleweight champion, and the WEC light heavyweight champion, among other accolades. He's also been a commentator on national television, a coach, an actor appearing in television and movies, and even in video games. While his story is one of found glory, his path to get there was anything but easy. In fact, in his autobiography, Frank shares some personal stuff about his childhood, his parents, his adoptive father, and his half-brother, Ken Shamrock. And I can tell you, I was a fan prior to reading his autobiography, but I literally couldn't put the book down, and I read the entire thing on a cross-country plane ride. You are in for a treat as we get to know the man himself, Mr. Frank Shamrock. Frank, welcome to the ThriveMore podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, brother.
You betcha. You betcha. I can call you every morning and wake you up with that intro if you'd like.
That would be great. I was going to say, every time I hear an intro of me, I'm like, man, that sounds really impressive. Like,
that guy did some stuff. He's done some stuff. Yeah. Well, let's just jump into it right away. What I didn't know a lot about was your childhood and your youth. And you were uncaged. I mean, the name of your book, as I'm holding up, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're on Spotify or Apple, you can't see this, but I'm holding up his book, Uncaged. You get right into it when you start about your childhood, which was not an easy trek. So if you can, for the listeners' benefit, just give us some background of where you grew up, kind of how you grew up, and what that first 18 or so years was like.
Sure. Yeah, well, I was born in Santa Monica, so I grew up in California. I've always been raised in California. But my first memories were living in Northern California, Anderson, Redding, so North Central. And yeah, I mean, we were just like poor welfare kids. I mean, nothing special or too special that I thought was going on. I thought perfectly normal.
Sure.
My life. My dad had left. I'd never met my dad, so we had a couple of stepdads and various father roles. But yeah, we lived in the low income apartments, and then when I got to be about 7 or 8, I started getting memories, like really forming memories. And that's when we moved in with my stepdad, Joe. He was a former Marine guy. It's the first time we had a house, kind of a family unit, and things appeared to be pretty normal until I started going to school. And then I realized like I was totally different than the other kids.
And talk about that. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, I didn't have any emotional like stability. Like things would just freak me out, or someone would threaten me and I would freak out, or I would try to do something and I wouldn't be able to accomplish it, and then so I'd have an emotional outpouring, and everyone was like, "Whoa, what's going on?" And I never knew I was it was how I was.
Yeah.
But so that I started seeing all these school psychiatrists and counselors and groups and teams, and like everybody was trying to figure out what was going on with me. And what I didn't realize was that you're not supposed to lock your kids in the closet, and it's really a bad thing. And so my mom had been locking me in the closet.
I mean, you say that in jest. So you say that in jest and laugh, but dude, like when you wrote about it, man, I was
it's horrible. But
wow.
What else do you do about it? And I didn't even know. So the funny thing, or the weird thing is, it was during the book that I figured all this out.
Wow.
I met my aunt who I never remembered, and
That's
she,
right.
found me hanging upside down in the closet from the back of my knees when I was a baby. And I never knew it was my mom. I thought it was these mean stepdads that were doing this to me. And so it's amazing how the mind works and how you develop. And so anyways, I developed all broken and traumatized, but I was also incredibly smart.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of in this weird conundrum where I was like in gifted education, but in, detention every day.
Yeah,
And
you
so,
skipped, as I recall, you skipped kindergarten and then you skipped like
yeah,
8th grade or 7th grade. You just didn't even, they just put you right
even
past it. Yeah,
yeah, they gave me the test. I go, oh yeah, I'll happy to do the test. Yeah, they
sure.
skipped
Yeah,
me. And then also, I think I was such a problem, to be honest with you. I think I was now that I have kids and I live in society, a normal society, I can see what a problem I was.
yeah.
Like how do you deal with this smart, traumatized, like high energy young man? Um, but I of course turned to things that made me feel better and got me in more trouble. Um, and and crime was one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, and let's talk about that because you're again. I'm just sharing what you were very open with about in the book. Um, Theft and stealing really became a way of life, not just because you want, but almost for survival in some aspects. And then it became, a way that probably that you were coping. If you can speak to that and really how that elevated, because there was a theme in the book that the behaviors continued to elevate and get more serious, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I didn't know there was like a chalkboard somewhere with with an ever increasing mark on it. I thought they just forgot about all that stuff.
Sure.
But yeah, crime. I was the troubled kid, so I did all kinds of dumb things, stealing and crime wise. But it wasn't until I went to juvenile hall for the first time, which for me, what I thought wasn't a crime, which was throwing rocks at a train. I mean, I was literally, 11 years old throwing rocks at a train. And I got convicted of a felony for it.
Yeah,
But
wow.
it sent me to juvenile hall where I hung out with all the bad kids, and they could not believe the things that were going on in my house and the things that I was living with. And I was like, what do you mean? We're not all doing this? And so it was the first time I became aware, like, oh my God, maybe my home life is not good.
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe that's part of the reason I can't function or I'm not making it. And so, I went and told my counselor, hey, this is what's going on. And, it's not normal and da, da, da. And she's like, well, you got to stop doing crime because that's what's going to take you away. I'm like, oh, hold on 1 minute. You're telling me crime will get me out of my house? Yeah. And so I fully committed. I mean, honestly, when you're 11 years old and you get that type of empowerment and you're smart
Yeah.
and you're living, I was living in a tool shed in the backyard at that point. And so anything seemed better. Right. And then, that began my journey as a ward of the state. But back to the ticking clock. So anytime I didn't like a situation, I went to the group home, the foster home, it's a continuing group of care to try to help kids, foster kids, because they got no parents. Like you got to care for them and grow them. And I was a totally troubled one. So if I didn't like the place, I'd do all the stuff that I did like. I would learn all the stuff that I wanted to learn, like the religions and the social things and the family dynamics and all this different stuff. And then I'd be like, all right, time to steal something and get out of here. And then I would go back to juvenile hall and I'd see all my friends because they were idiots. We're all doing the same thing, hang out with my boys. The community was great. They always cared for me in Redding, California. It's great juvenile hall.
Yeah.
And I genuinely liked it there. Like I was comfortable there. And so when I wasn't comfortable at these other places, I'm like, well, maybe we'll just steal that and then and just be an idiot about it. You like brazen, like just stick a big bottle in my jacket and walk away, when everyone's watching. So
because the
really
real desire was to get back to that place of comfort.
To go back to my team where I felt, where they were really truly helping me. Like they were like, okay, well that didn't work out for you. So now that you're here, we're going to have to move you over here and do that. I'd be like, okay, well that makes sense. Yeah, that tracks. But they'd always tell me, if you don't change your ways, you're going to end up in prison. Everybody would tell me that. And I would just laugh at them.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I'm wicked smart. I'm and then years later, I ended up in prison.
So let's talk about that. So it gets serious enough that you actually get sent to prison. And so what was that like? Because it didn't seem as, at least when you wrote about it, it didn't see. I've read several books on I don't know why, but I've read several books about people going to prison. I got to examine that myself, but it didn't seem to be like incredibly traumatic or scary as hell for you, like it is for so many people that go in.
Yeah, well, I do think that just being intelligent. Not that
Yep.
I'm smart, but I have a high IQ. I am
Yep.
not educated. I
Yep.
just have a high IQ.
Yeah.
So I think that helped me because I could see things and understand things.
Yeah.
And then, I left home when I was 11. Like, people, they get in trouble when they're 13, 14, 15. They do something dumb and they pick a direction in life. And mine just started really early.
Sure.
So I got to see a lot of development. I got to see the guys, the senior guys going off to youth prison. I was like, those idiots, I'm never going to end up there. I got to see the whole process happening. And I think that gave me more, knowledge to sort of survive and be comfortable. I didn't mind prison. I got to be honest with you. It gave me all the time in the world to think, to really, truly educate myself. I wasn't educated. I didn't know I wasn't educated. I was just smart. I didn't know things. And so that gave me all the time in the world to do that, to focus on myself, to really get in touch with myself and my own spirituality.
Yep.
Because you got 3.5 years, just going to sit around and try to survive.
A lot of time to think. And that's when you got, I mean, it's a stereotype, but that's when you got jacked as well, as I recall. You got,
100%. Yeah. Well, I had to, my last group home dad, Bob Shamrock, who eventually adopted me, which is how I became a Shamrock. He stuck with me. And even when I went to prison, he's like, well, you're an idiot, but you get all this time in the world to build your body. And so he'd send me bodybuilding stuff, and because that was his passion. And that's one of the things we shared. But I had all the time in the world to study. And I realized, like, wow, I do have superior genetics. That's kind of why Bob does like me, besides my, loving nature. He sees the mechanics that I never saw. I didn't know that stuff existed. And so once I really started studying like biomechanics, how the body worked and stuff, and I was like, oh, wow, it's like I could just, go crazy with this. And I did. I'm going to gain 27, 26 pounds of solid muscle in 3.5 years. Yeah.
And for the listeners who don't know, Bob Shamrock in the mixed martial art world, especially from the early stages of that sport, was very influential because of you, because of Ken, your half brother. But just for the audience, if you can, 30 seconds on Bob as far as what he did and how many lives he really did change and who he was.
Oh, yeah. Well, Bob ran the Shamrock Boys Ranch. It was the last place you went before you went to youth prison. Everybody knew about it. It was totally infamous. And the toughest, like, gnarliest dudes went there. But what they didn't know is he was just the sweetest man. And we were all like a family. And you came in, you got 20 brothers. Like, it just became this great social thing for kids like me, that were lost, that were out there. And to have a family, boom, like that. And then like a real awesome dad like him was super, super powerful. And then when the sport started, he just brought that over into the sport. He's like, all right, well, guys, we're going to go do this now.
Yeah.
But he's also the one that when I was I still remember I was sitting in Folsom Prison. And he's like, all right, son, well, you've done the work, and da-da-da-da. And, you got these career choices. You could be a great, stripper. That's that's an option.
That's a vocation. That's a vocation.
And I'm like, okay, Dad. And then he's like, or this fighting thing, this UFC thing is starting up. It's kind of like wrestling, And he just sold both of them like they were nothing. And I was like, why don't I really did screw my life up, didn't I?
I could be a stripper or a cage fighter. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Good man, though. Good man.
This segment is sponsored by Rockbox Fitness Franchising. Take control of your destiny and join the boutique fitness revolution with Rockbox Fitness. If you're ready to make a real impact in your community and own your own business that empowers people to achieve their best life, then Rockbox is the opportunity you've been looking for. They provide comprehensive support from site selection, upfit, training, and turnkey marketing, so you can open your studio with confidence and a strong recurring revenue member base. Visit rockboxfitness.com and click on franchise opportunities to learn more about this exciting venture in the fast-growing boutique fitness industry. It's time to turn your passion for fitness and for business into a thriving venture. From what I understand, that then you wrote about that home, that his group home, very self-regulating. So if you started to act out of accordance, either you had to put on some boxing gloves and settle it as young men, or the group kind of self-regulated because he had built this culture within that group home. That's what it read like. That he wasn't on everybody all the time. Kind of the young men regulated themselves a lot of the times.
Yeah, he taught you. He was a really good dad in that way.
Yeah.
That he saw the need in the boy and it's like, nope. Smack you upside the head, throw ice water on you, like you'll figure this out.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, and you think it's really terrible, and then you go, oh, that's right. That's what men are supposed to be doing.
And I think you wrote he was probably one of the first people, certainly adult, to give you a hug, to really embrace you, and that's powerful. That is so powerful.
Yeah, he really and it was good because I think he needed it too in his life. You know what I mean? Like we came along at a time where I was just all broken and traumatized, and then he had been a little dinged up. And so I think in that way we were really good for each other. Just to come along in each other's lives. And he was greatest. I mean, he's the only dad I've known. He's the only dad who laid that stuff down that I still do. Whatever he taught me is what I'm doing.
Yeah, you're paying it forward. I love it. So we fast forward. You serve your time. You do the time, and you get out. And if my memory serves me correctly, you're introduced to Ken Shamrock, your half brother, another young man that he'd adopted, and you go to the gym called the Lion's Den, very famous, of course, in MMA, early MMA days. And for what I remember is you literally got the hell beat out of you. Like that was the indoctrination. Like that was the first time you'd met Ken. Is that correct?
Well, it's second. It might have been the third, but each time was very brief. The very first time I met him, he had come home for his birthday because I was in the group home and he was older, so he had moved on and was in college. Yeah, and he had come home from his birthday, and Bob was like, "Listen, guys, if you get him down and let me spank him for his birthday, I'll take you to this. I'll take you to Trader Vic's. It's a great restaurant." And we're all like, "Yeah," and so I'm like, "Come on, team." This is my early days of leadership. I go, "Come on, team." And I take a step forward and he just grabbed my face. He was probably 250, just solid muscle. He just grabbed my face and stuck my head on the ground. And I was like, ah. And he's like, "No, you're not." He's like, "Oh." And then everybody just stepped back. I go, oh, okay. All right. But that was Ken. Ken was a monster. And he was a real, strong, tough guy.
And before you got in the ring, at the Lion's Den, when you get out of prison and it's kind of this trial by fire, I don't remember reading a lot about fighting or wrestling or any kind of structured martial arts. So when you stepped in that ring, did you have any base to work from, or was it just learning? Wow.
No, it's what Ken had taught me. And then, I've been in prison fights and street fights.
Sure.
Those type of rough activities. So I wasn't unforeign to getting roughed up, but the level that we were performing and the things that we were doing, that's why Ken beat the crap out of me. It's because back then the litmus test is if you don't lose your mind, break out in tears and run out the door and you're still breathing, you're in, because that's it. It's the fighting spirit. If you got it, you got it. If you don't, you don't. And so that was the litmus test back then. That's the only qualification you needed. And that's what we did to people. And that's what happened to me. Break them up psychologically, physically, and then see if they really want to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the account of it is amazing. I mean, you just kept.
It was so horrible. It's the worst 20 minutes of my whole life because I before that time I thought I was a tough guy. I was in prison and I've been in the street. I mean, I fought 8 guys one time. Yep. I would knock guys out. Everyone was afraid of me, but I never really got in fights because I was smart. And I was like, I don't know about that guy. Hey, wait a minute. Whoa. And so I'd always, detour, diffuse it unless I couldn't. But on that day, I realized, wow, I'm just going to be beaten here. It's just so horrible.
And then, but you decide this is what I want to do. And then it's Japan first, right? It's Japan. And that reads like out of Kill Bill. Like you're this guy that is being trained. You're living in squalor almost, very simple, simplified in Japan, learning really mixed martial arts, the next level of that to compete. Can you speak to that if you will a little bit?
Yeah, after 6 months of training, maybe 5.5, 6 months, I got the invitation, and that was come to Japan, finish your training, and then
Yeah.
perform.
Yeah.
And so I went. I mean, I lived there for almost 2 months, and yeah, I mean, it was a 10 dojo in the middle of a field. Like it was so,
It's out of a movie. Yeah.
it was so crazy in Shin Yokohamaku. It was the weirdest experience, but it wasn't. Looking back, I go, it probably wasn't as weird for me because I was in prison.
Yeah.
I was in Folsom 6 months before, so for me to make that trend, it's not that weird. But I
Sure.
think for the average person, they'd be like, "What is happening?" But yeah, just nothing but tatami mats and blankets, and just train all day, every day. Nobody spoke English, and so I just nod my head and follow and do whatever they
Wow.
did.
Wow.
Yeah, and then the older fighters, some of them spoke English. Funaki, Suzuki, they spoke English. Who would come in the evenings and drop some knowledge. But
Yeah.
yeah, nothing but training. It's the weirdest thing. Same
Wow.
routine every single day. Chants, rituals, exercises. Yeah.
Wow. And Pancrase, which is probably not as well known here in the States, that it was literally starting right then, right? That was really
Yeah.
the genesis
That
of
was the
it.
beginning. Yeah. The first
Yeah.
couple of years, they were just trying to figure out. Yeah. They were, the old style was UWFI with Fujiwara.
Yeah.
And so it was the same type of fighting, but it had predetermined endings.
Yeah.
They went hard, but they were like, yeah, and by the way, he's also going to, win tonight. And, once that happens too many times, people lose faith in it. They want the new thing. They want the fresh thing. So yeah, Pancrase was just coming out. Yeah, because I was in the King of Pancrase tournament. Yeah, I was in the very first one.
Yeah. And for the listeners, it's basically like what you watch with the UFC or the other leagues, except you can't punch with a closed fist, just an open hand, which still hurts like hell. But
Yeah.
that's mainly those are the kind of the differences.
Yeah,
And
and you can punch the body. You can punch the
yeah,
body,
yeah,
and you wear pads. Which what did my last wife called them? My Superman pads. I can't remember.
yeah.
She's like, "Oh, you got to get your Superman pads on." I'd
Yeah.
be like, "I never thought of that."
Yeah.
So yeah, they're different.
And you actually you end up becoming very successful and become what they call the champion. They call the King of Pancrase. What was that? So I want to understand that feeling that here's a young boy, was put in the closet, some terrible things happened to him, goes to prison, comes out, finds his tribe, finds his family, within a matter of a year is in Japan, and now you're fighting, and then you win. What are the emotions like when you win?
It was overwhelming, but most of the experience there was like because it was otherworldly. Because you would leave, you leave. I lived in Lodi, California. It's like country living, living out in the Central Valley, doing some farming, and then I would go to Japan, which is just night and day different, and I'd be a rock star. Like just literally people following me down the street, doing hours of autograph signing. And so it was this just wild sort of social. It's like everything socially was just so stimulating. And then the fighting, I was terrified the whole time. I don't know how everyone else was feeling. I don't know what was going on in their minds, but I was literally so scared that, it was a time warp.
Yeah.
Everything was speeded up so fast. It took me years and years and years to get over the energies and emotions and anxiety so I could slow it down
Yeah.
and see what the heck was going on. But for those first few years, I was just reacting and moving and I just hoping and because I was literally just terrified.
Wow.
And yeah, and so I never watched sports. I never got into these other activities. But that gave me all the time in the world to study this stuff and like figure it out.
Yeah.
So when most people go, "Oh, this makes me nervous. I'm terrified. I'm going to look the other way." Well, my job was to look at it, figure it out, so I don't get hurt.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
better figure this out. So when I was laying in bed at night, it was all mechanical and biomechanical and cardiovascular. And what about this theory? What about that theory? And I saw this video and let's draw this graph. And it was this process of like, we better figure this out or Like, how are you going to sustain this? Like,
Yeah.
because you're terrified. You don't want to go out every day and be terrified.
Yeah. Well, and that's where the cerebral.
Go to work. You're like, oh, it's a terrible day at work.
I almost died. That's that's a tough day at work. That's a tough day at work. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. You don't want to sustain that. So, so that was my other study, because I was like, man, I mean, I know I got these issues and stuff. It's been my whole childhood, but to then, walk into a cage and try to fight for your life and stuff. It was just, such a huge process to like figure it out and stabilize it and gain control of it.
Yeah. And some, there are a couple different types of fighters, but, some fighters are going in there and literally trying to hurt the other person. And usually outside the cage, they act differently, but in the cage, they're mercenaries. And then there's others who are trying to win and strategically win. Which camp would you put yourself in?
Oh, I'm trying to kill everyone.
Okay.
As polite and loving as possible. Yeah. No, because in my first MMA fight, I fought John Lober. And he was a street fighting tough guy, nowhere near my skill level. But he came from a different school. You fight on the streets, you beat him to death. You knock his teeth out. Like, that's what you do. And I was in that world in prison and stuff, but once I became a professional, I was like, you can't do that. Someone's going to sue you. Like, like, that doesn't make sense, because I also saw it happen to people, that were my mentors and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I fought him, and I had a chance to break his leg, and I went, oh, that's not cool. And break the guy's leg. How's it going to work?
Yeah.
And then I got his arm, and I was like, oh, and break his arm. Well, maybe he'll give up. After like 4 or 5 of those, I got tired, and he beat the shit out of me. Because he's like, I don't care. He's like, I'm gonna beat you. And so I had to do a psychological switch inside of me, which was, hey, if I'm really gonna do this, like, if that's really my job to beat people down, then that's my job. That's my sword. I'm swinging it, and I'm not gonna take any shortcuts with it. Like, can't risk me.
Yeah, and they're fully, 2 fully informed, consenting adults. So
everybody's in.
Yeah, everybody's in. Yeah.
Everybody's in on it. Yeah.
So you do this great stint in Japan, and then come back to the States, and I believe that's when you then go into the UFC. Is that correct? Was my timing correct on that? Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Tell me about that, because that's before the sport. It wasn't on ESPN back then, and it wasn't the large multi-billion-dollar company it is today. What was that like, competing in those early UFCs?
Well, it was, we were at some fairgrounds. Yeah. We had some, there was some hay on the ground. No, the comical thing about my career is that I did amazing things fighting in the UFC right after we got kicked off of cable and lost 90% of our audience.
Yeah.
Most people never saw what I did, because it was the dark period of our sport.
Yeah.
And at that time, we were just, it was just a political hot issue. People didn't really know what was going on, but it was an easy one, and no one knew what was really truly happening.
Sure.
In the fighting, outside of the fighting, people didn't even know. No one knew. I mean, people still don't know what's going on.
Sure.
But at that time, there was just nothing, and it was all fear. So, but I had the things I did and where I was developmentally in the sport. I would fall asleep every night visualizing and looking at these diagrams and thinking about these theories. And then I would start dreaming the moves that needed to be created. And then I would wake up and write that down and be like, hold on a minute.
Wow.
and I would go and tell my coaches, and, they're a whole bunch of fighters. No one believes any of that stuff. So they just pat me on the head and be like, all right, Frankie, well, keep doing this and stay focused and da-da-da-da-da. But there was a time of development where I could see, because I would go to fights and I would sit, 10 rows back next to some older woman, some grandma.
Yeah.
And I would just talk to her, because I'm like, there's something here. I get it, because it's terrifying when I'm doing it.
Sure.
So it must be exciting for somebody else. Like, it's got to be, there's got to be something going on here. But I would talk to them, and I would see them go through this very human process, which was, oh my God, I'm so scared. I can't watch it. Oh no. Tell me what's going on. Oh, are they okay? Fast forward, 50 minutes to when her grandchild comes out. Kill him! Kill him! And I'd be like, whoa, honey, what on earth? But you'd see it was like this human it was like this developmental thing,
Sure.
and get in there. And that's when I knew. I was like, okay, like this is crazy that we're all doing this, but this stuff is going to be very successful.
Yeah.
It's going to be really, once we get over this confusion and this misunderstanding of what it really is, or society just gets more barbaric and doesn't care, regardless, like people are pulled to this from like their spirit.
Sure.
That's when I fully committed. I'm like, give me a sword. I will swing it.
Yeah.
I will kill everybody. I will do anything. I will commentate. I will do this. I will do whatever you need.
And I want to get to that. So let's, I do not want to fast forward through your fighting career because it's amazing, but then you go to Strikeforce, reign there. Strikeforce was a competing promotion for UFC for the listeners, in Northern California, especially. And that was really your home turf, and you crushed it with Strikeforce. And then I think WEC after that. But how did you get into commentating? Because that is a very different skill set than fighting.
Yeah, it is. And I didn't know that, by the way, because my very first commentating job was for the UFC. And this was after we got kicked off of cable.
Yeah.
So we didn't have a lot of funds to throw shows.
Yeah.
So Bob, the old owner, who's a dear friend of mine, a great man, this was all his idea, the UFC and mixed fighting. He calls me and he's like, listen, Frank, I got a great idea. He's like, you're going to be the next big thing, and you're going to be a great commentator, and we're going to have you commentate a fight that you're also going to fight the first fight of the night on. And I go, well, come again? He goes, yeah. You'll come out, we'll film it just like it's a real fight, because it is. And then, but no, it won't be on the card. And then we'll put it for another pay-per-view, and we'll sell, we'll do a show without doing a show. You'll make me a bunch of money. I'll make you a commentator. I go, that sounds great. So the matchmaker is supposed to get me, a comparable guy. And it gets me Jeremy Horn, who just hangs on me. I can't do anything with him. I barely win. Then I run in the back, put my suit on, run back out, and commentate a pay-per-view show. And I'm sitting in my hotel chair that night, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think those two mix. I don't think I'm like, those are separate activities. I'm like, what the heck was I thinking? I like bruises on my head. He like elbowed me in the temple. I'm like, yeah, it sounds great, guys. It was so ridiculous. So yeah, that was my first lesson in how to separate these, activities and opportunities.
Yeah. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by ThriveMore Autopilot. The latest data shows a large amount of small to mid-sized business owners are living paycheck to paycheck, and that is not why you started a business in the first place. We all start businesses to create the freedom in our lives that we want and to give us options. But to do that, you need more leads, and you need to turn those prospects into long-term paying customers. Well, the solution is ThriveMore Autopilot. ThriveMore Autopilot is the turnkey solution to take the stress and the hard work out of new customer acquisition, which is the lifeblood of any small business. ThriveMore Autopilot works on your behalf to generate a waterfall of new leads through various channels, to nurture those leads with proprietary AI solutions that mimic human interaction, to sell memberships and help you increase your monthly recurring revenue, and they even provide you coaching and your team coaching on the most effective sales techniques and give you a community of other like-minded business owners. ThriveMore Autopilot is how you scale your business without stress and the relentless phone calls and texts and reach outs to the prospects to get them to show up for that first appointment or to show up to that call. So learn how ThriveMore Autopilot can help you win big by going to thrivemore.ai. That's thrivemore.ai. ThriveMore Autopilot, the strategic partner for small to mid-sized business owners to help you scale and live the life of your dreams. As I recall, you were a main figure in Strikeforce commentary after a while.
Yeah.
Was it Strikeforce? I can't remember. I think it was Strikeforce.
Strikeforce, yeah. I did Strikeforce. Yeah, and I did 3 shows with the UFC and I did Bellator. I've done, Glory
Bellator too, that's right.
Yeah,
that's
I've done pretty much all of the sports. But yeah, the first one was probably one of the dumbest things I've ever done.
Oh, that's a great story, though. You have a great story from it. Yeah. And what would you say? Because a lot of listeners, they have to give public speeches or presentations, right? And I always think about commentating. It looks easy on TV or when you're watching it, but that is not an easy thing to do. And so how did you learn that skill and hone that skill and get better at that? Obviously the first time they just threw you into the deep end of the pool, but as your career evolved, you were incredibly professional, one of the best in the game at commentating. How did you develop that skill?
Well, I accidentally got a mentor in Mauro Ranallo, who's the voice of PBC boxing, Showtime boxing, WWE. He's been a sports broadcast. Yeah, he's for like 40 years. But I got an opportunity with Strikeforce on Showtime to broadcast. They called me up, gave me the, hey, come on, do the thing. I'm like, yeah, I'm Frank Shamrock. I do it all. And but I think I mentioned earlier, I don't watch sports. I don't watch any sports. So I don't know what broadcasters or announcers do. I know what hosts do at like awards shows and,
Sure.
charity auctions. So anyways, I didn't realize like you got to know like there's a little bit of research. People actually go to school to it. So I show up extremely confident with no research done. I was also a champion fighter, and I was still the brand spokesman and owner of a Strikeforce, a lot of jobs. But I'm standing there getting ready to go. They're like, "All right, you ready?" And this is my live audition on Showtime. And then Mauro Ranallo looks at me and he goes, "Buddy, you okay?" Because I'm just sweating profusely. He goes, "Buddy, you all right?" I go, "Yeah, I'm a little nervous, man." I go, "I'm a little nervous." Yeah. He goes, "Why? What's up?" He goes, "Didn't you go to broadcast school?" I go, "No." I go, "And I don't watch any sports." Dude. I go, "I don't watch any sports." He goes, "What do you mean you don't watch sports?" I go, "I don't watch sports. I don't know what a broadcaster does." He goes, "Oh, wow." And he was such a pro. He turns to the cameraman and he goes, "Hold on a minute." And in 5 minutes, he taught me broadcasting.
Wow.
And that's it. Yeah. Do this, dip, turn, point, turn, snap, bop, bop. And I go, "Oh, well, that's not that hard." And I started doing it. But it is hard because you've got to work and think and speak reactionary in real time for other people's amusement and information. And that is the challenge in the job.
All right. So then we fast forward in your timeline. And again, I mean, this could be a Joe Rogan like 3-hour podcast if we let it, because your story is amazing. But if we keep this condensed, you then decide to go into acting or have an opportunity to go to acting, and you end up acting with, you did several stints in a commercial, but you actually act with Chuck Norris, who, for any of us, because I think you and I are probably somewhat similar age, whoever you grew up with Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris, like those were the guys. If you love martial arts, and you end up actually in right? Like that's crazy. That's a kid in prison at a young age, and now you're on a set with Chuck Norris. So walk us through that.
Well, you should know I'm a huge martial arts fan. So Chuck Norris, Bruce Lee, like that whole era was me with fake nunchucks in the backyard, getting in trouble, I'm sure.
Sure, of course.
And then after I beat Tito, this would have been in '99. I'd just finally gotten my first big time entertainment attorney, and I'd broken out of my contract, and I was sort of strategizing my future away from the UFC, because the UFC was actually dying at the time. We lost our audience. So I was looking to branch out and move into Hollywood, which was the long-term plan anyways, because you can only fight for so long. But my new attorney also represented Chuck Norris. So one day we were doing something, I can't remember, and he's like, "Hey, Chuck's over at Sushi. You want to go meet him?" I'm like, "Yeah." And we stroll in, and there he is, Chuck Norris. He's the man. And then he's like, "Oh my God, hey, we got that big sweeps episode coming up. Frank, you'd be perfect for this guy, Damien." And I'm like, "Yeah, sounds great." And his brother Aaron goes, "Oh, you're right. Yeah, good job, Carlos. Hey, brother, yeah. Hey, Frank, I'm going to follow up with you." And that's the end of it. We walk away, and I go, "Oh, that sounds kind of cool." but I've been in a lot of those Hollywood situations. And then, I got a call maybe
Sure.
3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, and they're like, it's happening. These are the dates. And I go, man, the only fly in the ointment is I got to fight Tito Ortiz 2 weeks prior, 2.5 weeks prior. I guess I might get damaged. Like I might have some damage. They're like, oh, we don't care. They're all fight scenes. You're fighting in a cage the whole time. I'm like, okay. So I beat Tito. I went home and healed a little bit because that was a tough fight. And then I went out and shot that thing, Walker, Texas Ranger, sweeps weeks. Big, it was big budget. And I actually got to fight Chuck Norris, the nicest guy, the sweetest guy. My first day on the set, I showed up at 1:00 in a stretched limo, and he stopped 2 full productions, Unit A, Unit B, so I could go around and meet them all. He's like, oh, this is Jim here. He's been with me 37 years, and this is Bob. I was like, what? He's such a nice guy. And I was like, oh my God, I'm the biggest star. Like I totally made it. And then every day after that, it was like 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day. Just grinding. But what a lovely, lovely man. And I ended up getting, he was supposed to beat me in the script. In the script that was written, he was supposed to beat me in a bare knuckle, no rules fight. And the day of that scene, he pulled me and a couple of the guys together, and he goes, hey, I got a problem with this. No one's going to believe that I'm going to beat Frank Shamrock in a no rules fight. So we need to change this up. And he changed the script. And so I accidentally get shot by the Macho Man, Randy Savage, with a shotgun.
That's right.
And all that we made up that morning because he's like, I don't feel good about this. No one's going to believe that. And I'm like, oh my God, what is the sweetest martial artist man on the planet? Yeah, a lot of respect for him.
Wow. That's awesome. And then just to put a bow on this, you were also very open in your book about a off and on again relationship with alcohol and substance abuse. And you talk about how I think many people can wake up and realize, oh crap, I've got a problem. And you had this epiphany and then made an immediate change. What was for the listeners, what was that epiphany where you realized, oh, wow, I'm that guy.
Oh yeah. I left my daughter at school. Yeah. I was supposed to pick her up. Because my wife had surgery. I was all on, I'm on the list. I'm the guy. That's me. And then I had a charity golf tournament instead, or as well. I don't remember driving home, and I certainly didn't pick up my little girl. And that's when I was like, whoa, like what is happening? After I retired, I didn't have that purpose and that passion. I wasn't, I was in pain, so I wasn't working out. I was golfing, which was hurting me more. So I was doing all these things that weren't, helping or like fulfilling me. But the drinking was making me feel better. I was like, I feel great. Like this, I feel fantastic.
Sure.
Just give me more drink. And so it was, just learning to deal with the pain, from that journey. So I had to get sober. And it took a lot for me. Like I didn't get the physical sickness, but definitely the spiritual, sickness.
Yeah. Well, I think it's commendable that you wrote about it and you were so open about it because it helps people, right? The more we talk about it, the more we can help people. And speaking of helping people, let's bring this full circle. You are now coaching executives, high performing executives. You're coaching, people that are at a pretty elite level. Why and how did you get into that? And just tell us a little bit about that now.
Sure. Yeah. Why? I mean, I've been training people since 1992. When I started my first weightlifting group in Jamestown prison, I think. So I was like, we got to be teaching this stuff. How come no one's teaching these things? And then that led me to being a drill instructor for the prison firefighters. And that gave me my first literal, leading 500 men through calisthenics activities, stuff. And so I realized at that time, I have a good, I communicate well and I understand what's going on. and I can see that the goal we're trying to achieve. And so in that way, like I'm a really good motivator and I'm a really good like leader. And so since that time, I've always done that. Once we get into something, I'm like, oh, all right, well, maybe there's a chance to improve and we could, do something, whatever. But my brain works in that process oriented way.
Yeah.
And that's what's made me really successful. And so it also opens every door because I go anywhere. I speak, I end up speaking for large corporations. I end up speaking for private companies. I end up meeting and going through doors that people just normally would never end up there. Just from structural, social, economic, whatever. And I meet so many interesting people and we all share the same problems. Like we literally all have the same issues, human issues in this journey and experience. And the only thing I've found to get through them is find somebody who's done it and got a little proof and seems to be happy about it because they got the info I need. They got the end data that I'm looking for, right? Whether it's health or wealth or fit, like it doesn't matter what it is. And I think it goes to like, how do you trust those people? How do you find those people? Where do these people come from? For me, they just show up in Carlsbad. Because I go, I love that idea. Why don't you come out? And they're like, seriously? And I go, yeah, seriously. Like, let's spend 2 days at the beach and like figure this out. Like what this thing that's keeping you up at night. Because for me, it was cage fighting. That was terrifying. That's gone. I sleep great. But if you're not, like, let's solve that for you so you can go back to being healthy, happy, wealthy, like whatever it is you were doing. And it's totally word of mouth. Like I don't even, it's just people call me and they're like, all right, Frank, it's time. I had a guy I met one time. I didn't see him for 11 years. 11 years earlier, he's like, Frank, my back is really hurting me. I go, well, bro, I know a lot about back pain. If, when you're ready, give me a call. 11 years later, he calls. He goes, it's so bad, I can't walk. He's like,
better late than never.
I go, bro, why don't you call me like 5 years ago? Yeah. Oh, it's so much fun. But yeah, so but I also have a spondylolisthesis in my L5. So I've broken my little stacking arm vertebrae. So every day my back goes and moves around. It's totally unstable, and it's structured spine all the time. Like it's completely a mess. So I know so much about spinal injuries and spinal alignment and restructuring and
Well, I'm going to ask you before we find out how people can get a hold of you and follow you. I want to ask you one final question. I ask this to every guest, and I've been waiting to ask you this question, Frank, after I read your autobiography. And I asked this question because it was asked to me, and it's a very powerful question. If we fast forward to the end of your life, your rich, beautiful life, and wow, this amazing journey that Frank Shamrock has been on, but we're at the end and we're at your funeral and you're looking down from above and a loved one is reading your eulogy, but they're only allowed 3 words. They can only choose 3 words. It doesn't have to make a sentence or a phrase, but they're going to choose 3 words that describe how you impacted them and or the world. What 3 words do you hope they choose to describe you?
Oh, he did it.
Oh, that's damn good. That's good. You did. You've done it, right?
Yeah, I did it. That's the thing. And I got this goal I'm trying to live to be 100 years old.
There you go.
I know that sounds hard, especially with all the stuff we just covered.
Exactly. People are like, "What the hell? No way!" Yeah.
But that's my goal.
You know what, Frank? I love it though because I had a boss once that said, "It ain't bragging if you done it," and you've done it. You've done it. You've just done so much. Yeah. And I mean, obviously, you should be, and I'm sure you are incredibly proud. But I am grateful for you coming on. I really appreciate this time. This has been so much fun. How can people follow you, connect with you, get a hold of you if they choose? Well, what's the best way for people to be part of your journey?
I'm best on social media. So I'm at Frank Shamrock on all social media platforms. I normally hang out on Instagram. And then my website is, of course, frankshamrock.com. But it's here's how it usually happens. Somebody wakes up one day and they're like, I don't really feel that this is not exactly what I want to be doing. That's exactly for what I've done and who I am. And then they go, I wonder how I change this. And then inevitably they get a hold of me.
Yeah.
And I go, well, tell me your story. And then if it's an interesting story, or if the mission is valued, if you're running, if you got a company, you got 300 people and you're unhappy, what's going to happen to your 300 people? I mean, like that's how my brain works. Like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And that's the first thing I say to them. Like, well, let's fix you so those guys are better, and then everything will be like a whole bunch better. And so that's just so people realize that, and then they go, "Oh my God, you're so right." And then we get to the truth of things, and then we deal with stuff because truth is hard. Reality is hard. Decisions are hard. Changes are hard, but they're all doable. You just literally just do it and go, all right, I guess I'm just going to do that.
I did it. He did it.
Yeah, exactly. He did it. Yeah. I told you he was going to do it. Yeah.
I love
great.
it. I love it. Sir, thank you. I'm really grateful for the time, and I've just thoroughly enjoyed this. I've been a fan of yours and followed you for such a long time, and just to hear you talk and see the joy in your face, like I can tell you are so comfortable in your skin, and you've done it, right? So thank you.
My pleasure, brother. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to the ThriveMore podcast. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for any of the resources that we mentioned during the podcast. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you have access to the latest and the greatest. You can connect with me on any of the socials at Real Roger Martin. And be sure to check out our website, ThriveMoreBrands.com. There you'll find information on the brands we support and information on franchising. Thanks again for tuning in.